Kia ora everybody. Welcome to Tuariki Talks, Friday afternoon, 2nd December 2020. Today I want to discuss who is allowed into New Zealand. The government has set rules of who can travel to New Zealand, and it is a little bit complicated. COVID-19 has decimated travel all around the world, including New Zealand. And I thought I would just go through the policies that are in place at the moment, at least as I understand them, and hopefully that will prove useful to you at this time. Before I get into that, just want a general comment on immigration. The Associate Minister of Immigration is Phil Twyford, and I send my best wishes to him and his wife. Phil is taking time out from Parliament because his wife has been diagnosed as suffering from cancer. How that will affect immigration, I'm not sure. I'm sure the government will have plans in place to make sure processing is not adversely affected. Recently, about 2 weeks ago, we were scheduled to have a webinar with Immigration New Zealand, the licensed immigration advisors, to talk about where we're at with skilled migrant category applications and policies. That was all of a sudden cancelled, literally 15 minutes before the webinar was due to start. The reason for that is evidently the government has impending announcements to make. So that's good, and we're all waiting for that, because there are literally thousands of people out there with expressions of interest already in the system. There are others who wish to apply, and yeah, it'll be good that the government actually now tells us what the new policies will be. I won't hazard a guess at what they'll be, other than to say that I think the bar will be raised higher, but exactly how and in what way, I don't know. And anyone who says they do, I mean, unless your name is Chris Farfoy, you don't really know what you're talking about. Anyway, let's get on to today's topic, which is who can travel to New Zealand. Okay, let's get started. Who can travel to New Zealand? Every person traveling to New Zealand must first have a confirmed booking at a managed isolation hotel. It is my understanding that at the moment, all spaces in these managed isolation hotels are booked out through to maybe late February. So those of you who wish to come to New Zealand, you need to contact the appropriate people to sort out your booking. Now, people who can travel to New Zealand today, assuming you've got the isolation space of the hotel, without having to first request permission to travel, are of course New Zealand citizens and New Zealand permanent residents. Now, that's permanent residents, not people holding resident visas. Holders of New Zealand resident visas with valid travel conditions can come to New Zealand unless you got your residence visa outside of New Zealand and you have not yet used it to travel to New Zealand. And you can travel to New Zealand if you're a partner or a dependent child of a New Zealand citizen or resident. And you have a valid visa based on that relationship. If you don't have a valid visa based on that relationship, you will then need to apply for a visa on that relationship. And if you're a diplomat, you can come to New Zealand. And if you're an Australian citizen or permanent resident from Australia who ordinarily lives in New Zealand, you can also travel to New Zealand without first seeking permission to do so. Now, you can also travel to New Zealand if you have an approved critical purpose. And what are those critical purposes? Well, before I get into that, the first thing is you cannot submit an expression of interest to travel to New Zealand while the border is closed if none of the following critical purpose reasons apply to you. So if you don't meet the requirements, and they are actually pretty tough, then while the border is closed, I'm sorry, but you're not going to be given an exemption to be able to travel to New Zealand. So let's have a look at what these are. Again, if you're an Australian citizen or permanent resident, and you are the partner of a New Zealand citizen or resident, you can travel to New Zealand if you're not ordinarily resident in New Zealand. But you must prove that you are in a genuine and stable relationship. Excuse me, and you need to provide evidence. So don't just write in and say, I am. As much evidence as you have. Describe your partnership, details of any previous shared living arrangements, supporting documents that demonstrate your partnership, joint bank account, rental agreements, house ownership, marriage certificate. Confirm your identities, yours and your partner's, children, and recent travel movements. Any evidence you have that demonstrates you are in a genuine, stable partnership, you should provide. There's no such thing as not enough documents in these ones. And with the children, you must provide their birth certificate, adoption certificate, if that's applicable, and evidence of legal guardianship, if that's applicable. And if your request to travel is successful, you will be given a single entry resident visa that will allow you to travel to New Zealand. Now, if you're the passport holder of a visa waiver country and you are the partner of a New Zealand citizen or New Zealand resident and you are in a genuine stable relationship, then you are able to apply for an exemption, expression of interest. But again, just like with the Australian citizens, you must be able to provide evidence that you are in a genuine and stable relationship. So all the evidence is the same. So as much as you can, put it in, okay? No such thing as too much information when it comes to partnership. And if you include your children, birth certificate, adoption certificate, and evidence of legal guardianship if that's appropriate. And in this case, you won't be given a resident visa. You will be given a 6-month visitor visa, which will allow you to travel to New Zealand. And if you do meet that standard and you arrive in New Zealand, then as soon as you arrive, you should then submit your residence visa application, assuming you qualify, you've met the 12 months relationship criteria for partnership. Now, family members of New Zealand citizens or residents who do not hold relationship-based visas, partner, dependent child, legal guardian, and you don't have a visa based on that relationship, you may be able to travel to New Zealand. But you must do so by traveling to New Zealand with your New Zealand citizen or family or resident family member, okay? Or you can prove that you actually normally live in New Zealand. And that's applicable sometimes because people went back to visit parents and family members or for funerals, and they normally live in New Zealand. But you'll need to provide proof of that, okay? And you can apply for your exemption. Best way is still to, I think, travel with your New Zealand citizen or residence visa family member back from where you currently live and submit the request to travel. And if you don't already have the visa, you do need to apply for the visa. Now, partners and dependent children of New Zealand work or student visa holders, they themselves must hold a work, student, or visitor visa. And they must prove that they normally live in New Zealand, okay? Now, this last one here, I just put in, have a partner or parent currently in New Zealand holding a valid work or student visa. I must confess, I'm not exactly sure what that means. That's just copying literally from the Immigration New Zealand website. It seems somewhat ambiguous to me. But if any of you have any specific queries, by all means, feel free to contact me or someone else at TDA. Now, work visa holders who are normally resident in New Zealand, okay? There's probably, I think, hundreds and hundreds of people out there are like that. You know, you went back home to visit family for weddings, funeral, whatever, you've got a work visa and you're normally residing in New Zealand, okay, you may be able to get an exemption. Now, the rules around that are if you held a valid work visa and you were outside New Zealand when the borders were closed, okay, you may be eligible for an exemption, but there's several eligibility criteria. One is you must have departed New Zealand between the dates of 1 December 2019 and 9 October 2020. If you left on 10 October or later, or if you left 30 November or before, then you're not eligible. And when you left New Zealand, you must have held one of the following work visas. Essential skills work visa that was either mid-skilled, higher skilled, or you received a wage that was at or above the median. Entrepreneur or talent visa, accredited employer, talent visa, arts, culture, sports, long-term skills shortage list visa, skilled migrant category job search visa, South Island contribution visa, or global impact visa. You must have held one of these work visas. Any other work visa, then you don't qualify. And you'll notice in there that actually includes people on open work visas based on partnership. Now, if you're employed by somebody, you must have been employed in the job when you left New Zealand, and you must have been continuously employed in that same job since leaving New Zealand. And you must still have that job when you apply for the exemption. And that's going to be very, very difficult to meet because if you haven't continuously been employed while you've been out of New Zealand, you can't apply for this exemption. Okay, and so that's going to be pretty difficult. If you hold or held an entrepreneur work visa, your business must, one, still be operating, and it must have continued to operate continuously since your departure from New Zealand. Now, if you did have a business, hopefully it is still operating, and you should have been able to continuously operate it because you should have had staff that could do that for you. If you don't meet those two, then again, you're not eligible. And all of you, you must have lived in New Zealand for more than 2 years before leaving New Zealand. And if you've lived in New Zealand for less than 2 years, but more than 1 year, then you may also be able to qualify if you've had one or more dependent children with you in New Zealand for at least 6 months, or you have parents or adult siblings currently in New Zealand, an ordinary resident in New Zealand, or you submitted an application for a resident visa before 10 August 2020, okay? Immigration in New Zealand is going to be pretty strict on this, I think. If you've lived in New Zealand for 1 year, 11 months and 29 days, you won't meet the 2-year eligibility period. And you will be judged under the one that's on the screen at the moment, 1 to 2 years. And so you need to meet one of those three. You've had one or more kids in New Zealand with you, either your parents or brothers, sisters currently in New Zealand as residents, or you've already submitted an application for a residence visa. The other part of this eligibility is if your existing visa expires before 1 January 2021, so that's what, in 29 days time. If your visa expires in 29 days time, you must have already made another visa application and made it before 10 August 2020. And that's going to catch a lot of people out because, you know, August, or September, October, November, December. So they're talking about 4 2/3 months that you should have put a new application in. And many people don't put the applications in until the last month. So in this case, if you've done that, you're going to be out of luck. Now, if you're one of those people whose residence visa was approved after you've left New Zealand, and this is fairly common, people applied for skilled migrant, they went home on holiday, whatever, and while they're away, their skilled migrant residence visa application was approved. Now, when that happens, or if you're an investor, you are normally given 12 months to come to New Zealand. Now, for many of the people like this, the 12-month period's expired. They were approved last year, were intending to arrive in New Zealand, but before they could do so, we went into level 4, then level 3 lockdown, and since then the border's been closed, okay? So if you had been approved a resident visa since leaving New Zealand, then Immigration New Zealand says they will get in touch with you. If this is you and you haven't been contacted by Immigration New Zealand, by all means feel free to contact me or any of us at TDA Immigration New Zealand. TDA Immigration, sorry. The other area that you might qualify for are critical health workers, okay? New Zealand is boosting up its supply of health workers because while we've been lucky, hugely lucky compared to the rest of the world with COVID-19, the rest of the world is collapsing. You know, we look at India, Brazil, USA, all of Europe, Britain, etc. Just terrible things that have happened over there. We're lucky, but the government has given huge priority, number one priority, to health workers because we need them and we need to be ready just in case something goes wrong. Now, so who are we talking about? Health and disability workers delivering critical health services in New Zealand. If you are a new employee and you've been offered a job, you must have a start date before 31 March 2021. Now, who are critical health and disability workers? They are people who are registered health practitioners, such as GPs, as confirmed by the Health Practitioners Competence Insurance Act of 2003. They are internationally qualified nurses who've been invited by the Nursing Council of New Zealand and are enrolled in a competence assessment program that starts before 31 March 2021. So these are internationally qualified nurses who haven't yet been registered for working in New Zealand. You're a worker that installs, operates, or maintains medical equipment. Now, this could be an opportunity for a number of you, you know. Exactly what does that mean? What medical equipment are we talking about? Well, they're not very specific on the detail, but if you think you might qualify and you want TDA to help, by all means, contact us. Paramedics and ambulance workers, including air and road. If you've been offered a job as a paramedic and ambulance worker and you qualify, then by all means, you should be able to get an exemption. Specified technical and support staff. What does that mean? Well, it means people working in the theatre, the operating theatre, radiology, cardiology, blood service, oncology, pathology, in the mortuary, the laboratory, that's the medical laboratory, blood services, etc., pharmacy services, nuclear medicine, hematology, hyperbaric medicine, and health research. And if you're workers delivering services in these services, mental health services, aged care, home care and support, palliative care, forensic health, addiction services, respite care, child health, hospice care, and disability support, you may also be entitled to an exemption to travel to New Zealand to either take up those jobs or continue working in those jobs. Well, that's it, everybody, for today. That's the update on who can travel to New Zealand. Hope it's been useful. If you have any specific queries, by all means, contact us at TDA Immigration. Let's just lift it up a bit. We're at 441 Queen Street in the CBD. That's on the corner of K Road and Queen Street. Our entrance opens up onto the forecourt of the Baptist Tabernacle Church. Our phone number is Auckland 3370380. You can also find more information at our website, www.tdavisa.nz. And so everybody, that's Tuariki Talks for Friday afternoon, 2 December 2020. Hope it was useful. You all stay safe. If you're traveling by public transport, on the buses and your Uber, on aeroplanes, don't forget, wear your face masks. Not just to protect yourself, but to protect everybody else. So, good night, everybody, and take care.